Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Lieutenant Governor, soon-to-be Governor McKee, and my colleague, Congressman Langevin. We're happy to take a few questions.
Congressman, how would you assess this bill's passage in the Senate?
I think it's a near certainty. Obviously, our two senators have been strong proponents of this rescue package because we are using the reconciliation process. Despite the best efforts, both in the House and by the President, to bring Republicans along in this process, they did not support it in the House. But the reconciliation process allows us to go forward with a simple majority in the Senate, which means we can pass the bill that the House passed.
And the lack of the minimum wage? I mean, it's in your bill.
It's in the House bill. We think it's really important. It's an important priority for the House Democrats. You know, people haven't gotten an increase in minimum wage in a very long time. It will mean 27 million Americans will get a pay raise, one that's long overdue. We think anyone who works full-time in this country should not live in poverty. So we included the minimum wage. The Senate parliamentarian has ruled that it cannot be part of the reconciliation process. I leave it up to the Senate to figure out what they do about that. But if they decide to pass it without that, then they'll send it back to us for us to have to repass it absent the minimum wage.
Congressman, you know that the Democrats control both houses of Congress now and the White House as well. But the vote appears to be that it was in the House, basically along party lines. Does it concern you that you're really not getting any bipartisan buy-in on
well, the bill is wildly bipartisan. It's supported by over 75% of the American people, Democrats, Republicans, and independent. So it's very bipartisan. The legislation is, the President worked hard to bring, as did we, Congressman Langer and I, to bring along some of our Republican colleagues. But in the end, the President made it clear, and the House Democrats made it clear, we're going to pass a bill that responds to the gravity of the economic crisis and the public health crisis that will crush the virus and help rebuild our economy. And all the economists, all the serious economists have all said what Congressman Landry mentioned, that we have to, the danger is to do something too small, that we could delay our recovery by a generation if we don't do this right. So we are prepared to move forward alone if we have to. We welcome Republican support, particularly if it comes back again. But we have a responsibility to respond to the urgent challenges that this pandemic has presented, both in terms of our economics and in terms of public health. That does it. So it's a fully bipartisan bill. The fact that Republicans didn't vote for it, it's supported by Republicans, Democrats, and independents. There's few pieces of legislation that go through Congress that have the support of 75% of the American public.
Yeah, let me just say that I know that that President Biden has not given up on the hope and the possibility of getting a bipartisan bill through the Senate. But he's also made clear that that issue is not going to stop us from passing the American Rescue Plan. We are going to pass a rescue plan. We'd like to have it with bipartisan support. The door is open to do that. But we are going to get this bill across the finish line, one way or the other.
Congressman, what are the biggest issues here besides minimum wage that are points of contention in this bill, as far as Republicans or Democrats were opposed?
In terms of tension, there's very little. Some have argued that the amount is too much, and maybe that's on the Republican side have said that that $1.9 trillion may be too generous. I completely disagree and reject that premise because you listen to some of the top economists in the world talk about how we need to go big and be bold right now. When you have strong, clear statements from the chair of the Federal Reserve, who's generally pretty reserved, saying to the Speaker of the House, for example, we've all heard the quote, "Go big, Madam Speaker." The interest rates at historic lows right now. We can pass a bill that we can ultimately afford to pay for because it's an investment in the American people, an investment in our economy that's going to yield benefits. Janet Yellen, again, as I pointed out, former chair of the Federal Reserve, current Treasury Secretary, says we need to be bold and go big. So look, there's no two ways about it. We have to win this war on COVID by crushing the virus on the health side, but we also need to confront the economic challenges that COVID has thrust upon us and that are incredible burden. We are going to be in a recession, no two ways about it, because of unfortunately because of COVID. The question is, and as economists have said, is it going to be a very shallow and short recession, or is it going to be wide and deep? We are arguing that we can achieve the former, a very short and shallow recession as opposed to the other way around by passing this bill.
Governor, first of all, do you expect to be sworn in tomorrow?
Well, I expect to be sworn in. It'll be up to the Senate in terms of the confirmation process, but it appears as though that's going to happen this week.
And do you think that what's in this bill as it passed the House would cure what ails Rhode Island's budget and what faces the municipalities ahead?
I think it's going to be a big, big help, and that, you know, I've said publicly, as people were saying, are you going to raise taxes to, you know, overcome the problem? I've been saying, look, let's see what happens on the federal side. This is welcome news, as I said before. So Congressman Cicilline and Congressman Langevin's leadership, I'm happy to be here today to recognize that. And it will help, it's going to help our municipalities significantly, as well as the state.
Any plans that you have with the money? Have you thought about that at all?
I think we just want to make sure that we invest it wisely and make sure we take this opportunity, because I think there is an opportunity with this many dollars coming into the state to invest in our schools, invest in our small businesses, and invest in our safety, right, in our public safety.
You've been meeting with a lot of municipality leaders. Have you spoken with them about how they can use the funds in their local communities?
Well, I think that, and I've mentioned this to both congressmen earlier, is that we want to make sure that the monies that are allocated to the state to the cities and towns gets directly to the cities and towns, and they don't get watered down by a state budget. So the idea is to get those dollars in whole to those cities and towns, and then the cities and towns are going to know how to invest those dollars in a way. And we'll certainly, again, I believe that a state's function is to provide guidance and provide resources, and then follow the lead of the local communities in terms of how to best use these resources.
What did you learn from the past?
Can I just add one thing about the city, and Governor McKee will appreciate this, having
Yes.
been a mayor. This was an issue of real contention in our negotiations with the Republicans. If you remember, we tried to pass a similar bill called the HEROES Act, and we called it the HEROES Act because it was intended to protect the heroes on the front line of the pandemic, our police officers, firefighters, frontline workers, first responders, teachers, to be sure that in the middle of a pandemic they wouldn't face layoffs because municipalities and communities were facing revenue shortfalls. So in this bill, we fought hard to be sure that money went directly to cities and towns, no matter their size. So what the governor described actually can't happen. It goes directly to the communities to help mitigate the consequences of this public health and economic crisis, as well as the state obviously getting a significant appropriation. But we did that because local communities are facing some revenue shortfalls. They're facing increased costs in responding to the pandemic. They're seeing a decline in business revenues, businesses that are closing, and the property taxes that are associated with that. So this is really about making local communities whole, but also giving them the tools to help rebuild the economy, which is a critical part of our kind of post-COVID recovery.
Absolutely. Yep.
We can take one more, because we have to catch a flight.
Mayor
Anyone else?
Elorza, what will you use the money for here in Providence?
So I want to underscore what Congressman Cicilline just said. You know, one of the structural challenges that we have is that in moments when there's the greatest need on city resources is when we have the fewest resources. And so these dollars coming to our city and directly to our state and directly to our cities is really a lifeline. It allows us to carry on all of our normal operations. It allows us to respond to the pandemic with vaccines and testing. But it will also allow us to make investments. And I'll give an example. This is just one thing that we're considering. We know that when the pandemic began, the small businesses that were able to pivot and adjust to the new reality were the ones that were already connected to online marketplaces. You know, take restaurants, they had online ordering, they had, you know, online reservations. They were just able to pivot so much easier. And I know that so many of our small businesses throughout the community, they just don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the capacity, the technology. And so that's the kind of investment that we want to make, making it so that our businesses are better able to respond to the current needs, but it's also setting up the foundation for the world that awaits us on the other side.